Peace, family. It's your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Thank you for watching the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel. It is time for night school. Every night here on the Marc Lamont Hill official channel, we hold night school where I break down the most urgent conversations, the most intense debates, the most pressing issues going on in the world today. And tonight, all eyes have been fixed on the Democratic National Convention. And how could they not be? This is the Super Bowl of American politics. When I say that, I'm talking about the US presidential race. It is the Super Bowl of American politics. Every 4 years, everybody in the United States pays careful attention to what's going on. And they watch every bit of the drama, from the debates to the conventions to the actual election night. Everyone's eyes are glued to what's going on. And this was no exception. And so here we are. Convention night. Again, 6 weeks ago, this was unimaginable. No one thought that Kamala Harris would be accepting the Democratic Party's nomination, but here she is accepting the Democratic Party's nomination. And the Democratic Party, to their credit, put together a really sort of impressive week of speeches and presentations and arguments. When I say impressive, I'm talking about at the level of performance. I'm saying it looked good, much better than the Republican convention. They had bigger stars. They had better stars. They had better speeches. They had more articulate speakers. They had more interesting things going on. And it all sort of built up. I mean, the Obama night was crazy. The Clintons, were there. Everybody who was there brought their A game. But tonight was Kamala's night. Tonight, the Democratic Party created the conditions for Kamala Harris to be the biggest star of the night. When you think about Kamala Harris's speech on a Thursday night, the final night of the convention, it made sense that all the other stars came earlier, because you don't want her competing with Barack Obama. You don't want her competing with Michelle Obama. There were rumors that Beyonce was finna show up. And I told people, nobody listened to me, but I told people, I said, Beyonce Knowles is not showing up tonight and performing, because that would only upstage Kamala Harris. Now, maybe if Beyonce were to introduce Kamala Harris, but you don't want Beyonce to come up after Kamala Harris. I mean, come on. You don't want her to perform right before Kamala Harris. Unless it's a smooth transition, let this be Kamala Harris's night. Let her shine. Let her do her thing. And so the Democratic Party created those conditions. What I want to talk about is the actual speech. I'll start with the performance. Then I'm going to get to the content, the substance. So stay with me. In terms of the performance, it was a solid speech. It wasn't the best speech of the convention. It wasn't the second best speech of the convention. It wasn't the fifth best speech of the convention, but it was a solid speech. It was better than anything Joe Biden's done. Although this week Joe Biden gave one of his better speeches, but it was strong. Kamala Harris, her personality showed more than it ever has. Her energy was there. She looked sharp. She looked like the antithesis of Joe Biden in all the ways. She told great stories. She reached into that Obama bag. You talk about what your mama said. You talk about what your grandmama them say. You tell your story. You make it make sense to America. She didn't have to defend her blackness, but she made it very clear through her story how she would be legible to Black folk, not just in terms of being Black, but also her story being compelling. Talking about she's from the flatlands in the Bay. Breaking all of that stuff down was helpful, I think, for people who had questions. She spoke to values. She spoke to principles. The first 30 minutes of the speech, though, I got to say, I was like, this is great value talk. This is great energy talk, but I didn't hear substantive policy stuff. It seemed like she jumped to kind of the danger of Trump. And look, that is a compelling argument. She made her most compelling argument. Kamala Harris, in many ways, is following the playbook of Biden, which is we can't have this guy back in the White House. We can't have 4 more years of Trump. And so her most compelling arguments were not, here is my grand vision for what America could be. It wasn't a transformative vision. It wasn't even an Obama kind of hope and change kind of thing. It was more like, hey, we can't go back. We've already done the hope and change, and we can't go back there. He represents back there. And so it was, in that way, quite interesting. I won't say disappointing, but it was different than most nominees do. This was an opportunity to share with America your grandest vision. Now, she talked about things like education, she talked about things like housing, healthcare, etc. But it was more, again, about protecting what was done and protecting what is being done than it was about um, what will be done. And maybe she doesn't want to present herself as a changer, as a change agent, as a reformer, as a radical, because they're trying to cast her as a radical. Lord knows she ain't a radical, but that's the game that the Republicans are playing to miscast her. And so it seems as if Kamala Harris was in her best comfort zone, talking about how bad Trump is, saying, and saying, look, now with the Supreme Court, what would it look like to give Trump the presidency without guardrails? It's a great argument. Talking about, this guy lost and he stole your votes. And then this guy lost and then he sent people to the Capitol to stage a coup. I mean, he did a prosecutor's job masterfully. He painted a picture of why Donald Trump is guilty. She made a case for why Donald Trump can't go back to the White House. It's a compelling case. It's the case that will have a lot of people voting for her, not because they love her, but because they hate him. And I think that's okay. I think it's unfair to compare her to Barack Obama's speech. I mean, or to Barack Obama. Barack Obama is a once in a generation talent. It would be like comparing. It's like Kobe Bryant, right? Kobe Bryant always got compared to Michael Jordan. It's like, well, yeah, compared to Michael Jordan, he might not be Michael Jordan, but he's a hell of a Kobe Bryant. I'm not saying Kamala is necessarily Kobe, but I'm simply saying that if there is a figure that looms so large that you can't see or think past them, everybody else is going to pay the price in terms of how they're received. All right. So that was I won't say the good part. That was the presentation part. Presentation, I give her a B plus, maybe even an A minus. I thought it was strong. I thought it was to the point. It didn't last too long. It wasn't one of them, 10-hour speeches where we got to sit there, like wrap it up. It wasn't none of that. It was a great speech in that way. Here is where it got weirder and weirder and weirder. I thought it was going to get weird during the prosecutor's talk when she explained why she was a prosecutor. She actually did a great job of breaking that down. I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I mean, to be clear, I do disagree. I actually don't think that's the way to go. But I thought she did a wonderful job of saying, like, look, I've always represented the people. When she told that story about having a friend who, as a young person, was sexually assaulted, or she was able to say, look, that brought me into a career of defending the vulnerable from the powerful. And then she kept saying, from the people, representing the people, representing the people. I've always represented the people. That was beautiful. That was powerful. There were some moments, there were some jewels, as the pilot said, family of love, not blood, when she talked about the kind of built community that she had. Something really powerful about that. All of that was good. All of that was good. But then at some point, you got to talk policy. And the elephant in the room, there were a couple elephants in the room, but some of them she addressed, some of them she didn't. But the biggest elephant in the room, of course, is U.S. foreign policy. She started by saying, and I made a note because I wanted to make sure I quoted her right. She said she would ensure that the U.S. would have, quote, the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. Now, I understand what she's responding to, what she's playing to, right? Particularly as a woman, right? Because the first allegation is always going to be, do you want her to have that phone call at 3 a.m.? Do you want her finger on the proverbial button? Do you want her in the war room? So her coming strongly in the area of foreign policy and really just militarism is not surprising to me. It comes with the job. Again, if you're running to be the leader of the American empire, you got to do imperial shit. We have to accept that that's kind of the taken for granted assumption. Some people will be better or worse at it. Some people will be more humane or not. But if we presume that someone's going to run for the U.S. Empire leadership and not commit to maintaining and protecting that empire, then we're probably being naive ourselves. But saying that we need the most lethal fighting force in the world seemed excessive, even for imperial leadership. Obama would not have done that. Hillary Clinton likely would not have done that. Biden would have done that. And he does do that. That's his thing. But at a moment where people are still fatigued from war, where people are tired of death, where people don't want to hear about military intervention, and where Donald Trump has argued that he's the only president that didn't get us into wars. I mean, it's a disingenuous statement from Trump, no surprise. But nevertheless, we're at a moment where people don't want to hear that talk. And for people who are skeptical on the left, people who are progressives and radicals, people who don't want war talk, to say not just that we're going to protect our soldiers or defend the U.S.'s interests abroad and domestically, which is enough, more than enough. When you say that we're going to have the most powerful and lethal, is that the right quote? The most powerful and lethal fighting force in the world. That for me, the strongest, most lethal fighting force in the world. Of course, no president's going to say, I want the weakest, or I want a mediocre fighting force. No one's going to say, hey, I want my fighting force to be a little less strong. No one's going to say that. I get it, right? Something about that word lethal, sort of talking again against this narrative or this issue of Negro politics, to quote Achille Mbembe, this idea of the state sort of controlling and determining people's capacity to live and die. When you sort of bolster the Negro political capacity of the state, saying, look, we have the ability to go out here and kill whoever we want, when we want. I want to make sure that we always do. That makes people anxious and nervous who are already skeptical. I see you, Boaz. And so that was tough. But then the real elephant in the room, the biggest elephant in the room, came when the question of Israel and Palestine popped up. And I thought that I knew that, let me put it different. I knew that she was going to have to say something about Israel that was going to irritate people who are reasonably and appropriately critical of Israel as they prosecute this genocidal war in the Gaza Strip. Wasn't no doubt about it. Wasn't no doubt about it. You're gonna be mad, when you hear that. I was frustrated when I heard it. But she said a lot, and I'm gonna play the clip so that we don't miss what she said, because I think that it's worth hearing. I think it's worth seeing. I know y'all heard it and saw it, but I want to do it again for those that didn't, because I want to break this down in a very particular way. So stay with me, y'all. Stay with me. Here is Vice President Kamala Harris in her DNC nomination speech talking about her stance on Israel and Palestine. Here it is right here.
Innocent long time. What has happened in...
I paused it there for a reason. Let's pay attention for a moment to what just happened. This was rough, man. Nothing happened that I didn't expect. Um, but I hope, you always hope against hope, right? As Du Bois said, a hope not hopeless, but unhopeful. Vice President Harris talked about, she said, let me be clear. Whenever somebody said, let me be clear, politicians do that, you know they're going somewhere interesting. She says, I will never stop supporting Israel's right to defend itself. Translation. I will never support a weapons embargo to Israel. I will never support a weapons embargo to Israel or against Israel, on Israel. Whatever preposition you want to use, Israel ain't never going to run out of weapons because of the US. We've seen other countries do it, but the United States has maintained its unique and special relationship to Israel. Some of it is us giving them weapons, some of it is us selling them weapons. But in both cases, we're the source, we're the plug. And the language of Israel defending itself, again, ignores the violence of occupation. It ignores the fact that Palestinians are responding to the violence of Israeli settler colonialism and apartheid, not the initiators of or instigators of violence. That is simply factually untrue. But we continue to peddle that narrative. In fact, the entire DNC all week peddled that narrative. She pointed to October 7th as evidence for why Israel needs weapons. Again, that is a mainstream liberal political position. It's inaccurate. Again, it acts as if history began on October 7th. History didn't begin on October 7th. History began long before Hamas and allied groups breached the border of Israel on October 7th. But if you ignore all of that, then yeah, it looks like random Palestinian aggression, as opposed to looking at the violence of the siege on Gaza, the violence of the occupation, the violence of the Gaza Strip having been turned into a concentration camp for decades, the violence of apartheid. None of that was broken down. And I don't expect her to break that down at the DNC, because that's not who they are. That's not what the goal is. That's not what the project is. But it's the truth. Again, that's not a Kamala Harris specific critique. That is just how American politics works. And if you're running for the presidency, you can't say that stuff, but you can do better. You can do better. And you also don't have to be president. You can take a more principled position. But if you're going to run the president and say, look, somebody's got to run this empire, I'm going to be the most principled leader we can have. Okay, this ain't it. Even in context, even in that context. So when Kamala Harris says, well, you know, there was violence on October 7th, there was unspeakable sex crimes, you know, again, advancing this narrative that has been debunked largely around mass rapes, just like the dishonesty of, you know, baby beheadings and, you know, all the things, some of which President Biden said he saw, which he didn't see because it didn't happen. But I digress. All of that got the crowd to their feet, but you notice the crowd was very divided. Some people stood up and jumped for, you know, Israel's right to defend itself and clapped. And on social media afterwards, you can hear and see the liberal Zionists and the right wing Zionists just coming through and saying, good job, good job, good job. And she said the violence on October 7th that was basically perpetrated by a terrorist group called Hamas. She hit all the AIPAC talking points. She hit all the buttons. But here's what was interesting to me. Not what she said about Israel. That was, again, paint by the numbers, Democratic, Republican talking points. Anybody who runs for president is going to say what she just said. It was what came. Y'all notice something missing? When she talked about the violence that happened in Israel, she said it was perpetrated by Hamas. She said the terrorist group. She said who they were. She said what they did. She broke down all of it. She said who the victim was and who the perpetrator of the victimhood was. She made it very clear who the good guys were and the bad guys. And then you get to the suffering of Palestinian people, and suddenly we're speaking in random ghost terms again. It's just like those headlines, you know, terrorists kill 4 Israelis. And then you look over later, it's like 4 Israelis killed. By who? In this case, she talks about the suffering of Palestinian people for 10 months. She talks about the violence that they've experienced, the being lost, the homelessness, or whatever you want to call it. She talks about that. She says innocent people, innocent lives lost. Innocent lives lost. How'd they get lost? Who killed them? Who took those lives? Who's responsible for harming the innocent? Who's responsible for the violence? Who's responsible for the suffering? Not a word, not even the word Israel in the vicinity of that sentence. Y'all might think I'm nitpicking, but I'm not. I'm saying that this is how American foreign policy works. This is how the American media apparatus works. When it comes to talking about Israel, they're very quick to name Palestinians, Palestinian groups, Palestinian organizations as the reason for it. But when it came to Palestinians, suddenly there was a victim, but there was no perpetrator. I'm gonna play it again. I'm not nitpicking. Listen to it again. Mass hunger. Who's starving them? Who's blocking humanitarian aid? Who's stopping the food from coming in? Who's destroying the opportunity to get food by destroying the built environment and destroying the food corridors and destroying the shelters and bombing schools? Not a word. Now somehow we got back to the hostages. We already did the Israel part. Now, even in the Palestinian part, we're going to end this war so that the hostages are released. That's back to Israel. Again, let me be clear. I want the hostages. Let me be clear. I want the hostages to be released. I don't believe hostages should be captured. Hostages should be released. Suffering should end. All of that. But it's just, there's no critique. There wasn't even a critique of Bibi Netanyahu, which is low-hanging fruit these days. You could support Israel and still criticize Netanyahu for prosecuting this war, but not.
Can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self.
Now,
with respect,
that was good. Listen to this.
Suffering is
I got a critique, but I also have to say Kamala Harris said something that most people don't. Listen to this. Now it cuts off there. Self-determination gets cut off. I'm assuming that that's a coincidence. But dignity, freedom, safety, and self-determination is important. Dignity, fine. Security, fine. That doesn't mean much. I mean, it means something, but it doesn't mean much. It's not bold. Freedom. Saying that Palestinian freedom is something that's a priority for her is important. Somebody said name drops are for diss records, not political speeches. Mark. Well, she named Hamas. She named Trump. Right? So she's naming names. She is naming, dropping names. She didn't have to drop Hamas. She could have said Israel's suffering at the hands of its enemies, right? But she named Hamas because there's points for naming Hamas. There's no points for saying Israel's prosecuting a genocidal war as a necessary and unavoidable outgrowth of being an apartheid ethno state. Them name drops don't work the same way, but let's not pretend that she wasn't dropping names. That's not honest. But let me get back to the point. She did call for Palestinian freedom and Palestinian self-determination. She's talking about a two-state solution. Now, I don't support a two-state solution as a legitimate, viable possibility at this moment. Again, it's not. It doesn't matter to me whether it's a one-state, two-state, whatever. That's up to the people who live there. It's not my business. But if you're asking me as a policy analyst, if you ask me as a policy analyst, can a two-state happen? No. So there's a way that none of it matters. If you're proposing a policy solution, it doesn't work. But saying that Palestinian people deserve freedom and self-determination is a big deal because for decades, we've only talked about Israeli self-determination. Zionism is seen as the political manifestation and outgrowth of Israel seen as the necessary outgrowth of Zionism, which is an attempt and aim at Jewish self-determination. And so that's all the oxygen in the room being taken up. around self-determination talk is Israel and Zionism. But now to say, wait a minute, other people deserve freedom, dignity, safety, and self-determination. That is a big deal. She recognized that needed to be said. And so I give her credit for that. But at the end of the day, when we break down the entire speech, this was, if you're a progressive or a radical, this speech is not going to satisfy you. But this speech wasn't written for you. It wasn't given for you. It wasn't being spoken to you. If you are someone who was looking for an excuse to vote for her because you, despite feeling really anxious or conflicted about her position on Palestine, this speech wasn't going to do it for you. This speech did not do that. She did way more than Joe Biden has ever done. She has said way more than Joe Biden has ever said on this issue already. But that's a low bar. This speech wasn't for you. But if you wanted to be energized, if you wanted to be reminded of the stakes, if you wanted to be reminded that basically, look, we all suck on foreign policy. We all suck on Israel, Palestine in particular. But one of us is going to at least protect our rights and freedoms here in the United States, and the other person is a monster fascist who's shown us that he can't run the country with dignity, care, or justice. Then this speech hit home for you. So it was light on policy, no matter what you think. It just was not a policy-heavy speech. Now, all speeches don't have to be that. Donald Trump ain't never been a policy-heavy person. So maybe she's trying to go bar for bar with him. But at the end of the day, this was not a policy. This was not a speech for policy wonks. It was not a speech for the left. It was not a speech for radicals. But it's also a reminder that that's not who Kamala Harris is. Kamala Harris is a mainstream Democrat, a moderate, who is a considerably better option domestically than Donald Trump. So if that's your priority, then you'll be persuaded by the speech and by her. If you feel like the prosecution of a genocidal war abroad is a moral and political non-starter, then you're not going to vote for her. And this speech is not going to convince you otherwise. You have to make your decisions about that. I've made mine so far. Yeah, it could change. I mean, things change, but as of now, I've made mine. But I don't think either position is wrong. I think it just comes down to what you value, what you prioritize, and how you see the best strategy for getting us free. And so at the end of the day, man, this speech was interesting, but it was, somebody wrote in and said, y'all kill me with the policy. Oh, what's up, bro? Not one convention speech is about policy. It's best about positions. Policy comes from legislation. I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that, brother. I think, though, that even in terms of positions, I think she didn't even give as clear a policy vision. I didn't necessarily walk away knowing what she thinks the U.S.'s position should be in foreign policy. I didn't walk away understanding how she thinks the criminal justice system should operate. I didn't understand how she thought the economy should be reimagined, restructured, or protected and maintained to defend the people she thinks matter. She also didn't say nothing about poor people. And again, like, she ain't alone in that. She ain't alone in that. A whole lot of people don't talk about poor people. They talk about the middle class. She talked about being able to protect the middle class because she's from the middle class. Trump talks about that, even though he ain't never been near the middle class. When I look at her comments, her speech, and I look at it in relation to the rest of the convention, she was not out of step with the rest of the convention. But I think there were speeches that were more policy oriented and that made it clearer what the vision was. And it seemed like the moments where she talked about policy the most, it was saying, look, we did this and Trump undid it, or Trump did this and we're going to undo it. And that to me isn't quite sufficient for this kind of speech. So that's just me. That's my take. that's my Kamala breakdown. When you come back, I want to talk about more than just Kamala Harris. I actually want to talk about what it means for Palestinians to have been sort of erased from this convention in a very particular way. We'll talk about it on the other side. Stay right here. We'll be back in about a minute. Peace, family. Welcome back to Night School. By the way, some people asked me what the shirt was. This is actually, who knows what this is? Type it in the comments. If you know who this legendary human being is, write this in the comments. Don't be silent. Write this in the comments. Tell me who this is. And if you give me one of their favorite, one of this person's famous slogans, it's even better. Also, I want to shout out Robin Walker Murphy, who gifted 10 channel memberships tonight. I'm so grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your generosity. We need it, and you were there to show up for us, Robin. As always, we're so, so grateful. We also got a comment coming in super chat from LaChina Evans, who said, she clearly says she understands the situation, but y'all just want to hear what you want to hear. Fix America shit before worrying about other countries. I hear you, my sister. Here's the thing. She says she understands the situation. All candidates say they understand the situation. And she might. I don't doubt she's informed. And she knows as much as anybody, you know, as vice president. She got all the foreign policy briefs. She knows all the details. I'm sure she's been schooled on the issue. The question is, how does she understand the issue? What she said out loud to us does not to me demonstrate a clear understanding of the situation, or she does have a clear understanding of the situation and is making the wrong choice. Either way, and I hope it's the first thing, because if it's like, yo, we can explain more and then you understand why we have to do something different, that's cool. If it's like, yo, I know the right thing to do and I'm just not doing it, that's nasty work. So I hope that's not the case. This idea of fixing American stuff before worrying about other countries. The thing is, it is American stuff, sister. Like, it's not just, hey, we want you to stop what's happening over there. We're saying stop giving our money to it. The United States actually funds Israel. We give billions of dollars every year, not to mention extra money this year, to fund the oppression of Palestinians. So it's not just that we can mind our own business by like not talking about it or by not saying anything in the policy realm. It's that we have to actually undo something. This isn't about what we say, it's about what we do. Israel only oppresses Palestinians with US support, military support, economic support, and political support. And so because that's the case, we absolutely, positively have to say and do something. And if you care about American schools, if you care about American roads, if you care about American housing, if you care about American healthcare, then imagine what we could do if we weren't sending billions of dollars over there and we kept it here. So it is a domestic issue. I appreciate your analysis, though, and I appreciate the comment. I see it a little differently than you, but I respect and appreciate what you're saying. How old are you, Mark? What did I say? Something like immature? Did I say something that shows like naivete? Am I talking like I'm young? Does that sound like I'm too young? I don't know. That's an interesting, strange question. It's so so many comments coming in. Should be wearing a Fred Hampton t-shirt. The chairman of the Black Panther Party chapter in Chicago. I mean, I'd love to wear a Fred Hampton t-shirt. I have Fred Hampton t-shirts. Shout out to Chairman Fred, his son, who's a comrade. Yeah, all power to the people, all power to the great Fred Hampton, uh, who was murdered by the Chicago PD, with help of other entities, I'm sure, in his own home in front of his lady on December 4th of 1969. What a what a loss. What a loss we experienced with that Fred Hampton. But hit the like button, by the way, as my sister says. My sister, I can't say it, please. Someone said, Mark, is your reasoning for your vote because you live in a swing state? Interesting question. My vote is complicated, and we can have that conversation at another time, maybe, in greater depth. But the short answer is, I don't see voting as a reflection of my individual, like, it's a tactic. I'll say what it is. I see voting as a tactic. I see voting as a strategy, and I believe firmly that we don't vote our way to freedom. We don't vote our way to liberation. But voting is a bullet. It's a tool. It's a weapon that we use in our struggle for freedom. And so, to me, I want to vote in a way that gets us our best outcome. In the past, I voted Green, and I'm a Green Party member. I remain a Green Party member. I plan to continue to be a Green Party member. And it's been important to me for us to build the party, grow the party, expand the party, so that we can at some point, sooner than later, mount a significant third party run for president, but also to build a political movement at the grassroots level, at the local, national, statewide levels, regional levels, so that we can really get the kind of outcomes that we want. That was that's why I vote Green. That's why I support the Green Party. That's why I appreciate the Green Party. That's why I love my family and comrades in the Green Party. The last few years, I haven't been as, and I said this to Jill Stein when she was on the show, if you all remember, I haven't been as excited or pleased with our efforts in between the presidential elections. I don't want to be in a party that just every 4 years shows up with a celebrity candidate and spoils and leaves. And I'm not saying that that's what the Green Party is, but I think that that's a danger if we're not on the ground. And the Green Party in certain cities is on the ground. In certain states, they are on the ground. We are on the ground. But I hear from too many people in too many places, yo, I don't hear nothing about y'all until y'all run for president. And so that's a factor for me. I'll be honest with you. That's a factor for me. I disagree profoundly with Kamala Harris. I disagree profoundly with Donald Trump. I don't think they're the same, though. And I think that the danger of Trump returning to the White House is considerable. And I think that in the past, I have said, and I have felt like we need to build third-party movement at all costs. And I would still feel that way if I felt like the work was being done by the third-party movements to get us there. But I don't feel like we're doing a good enough job there to justify Trump returning to the White House. I understand the interconnection of our issues. I think they are interconnected. But I also recognize that there are issues that I have to prioritize as an American, as a Black American, right? What do I think about reparations? What do I think about reproductive justice? What do I think about education? If I'm throwing all that away, when Trump comes into office, then I have to ask myself, what would make that worth it? And I absolutely stand in unwavering solidarity with the Palestinian people. My frustration is, and I think the reality is, which is why it's frustrating, is that voting Green, voting for Cornel West, voting for Claudia de la Cruz, voting for Donald Trump himself, all these things make Donald Trump more likely to be president. That's a fact. But they don't make life any better for Palestinians. Now, we could make a moral judgment and a moral assertion and say, it is immoral to vote for genocide. And so we're going to hold Democrats accountable by saying, if you continue to prosecute a genocidal war, if you continue to underwrite a genocidal war, you don't get our vote. So that maybe next time when Democrats lose this election, then they say, well, we lost it because we didn't support Palestine. We lost it because we didn't listen to the left wing of our party. So we got to do better. That's possible. I mean, it would certainly work with the Tea Party and Trump, except we tried that with Hillary. And Zionism is still winning. I'm not saying we give up on defeating Israeli occupation or Israeli violence or Israeli oppression, Israeli apartheid. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that that voting might not be the most powerful weapon we have to defeat that. And so when Donald Trump is president, we have very little room to negotiate or pull. We don't have anyone listening to us. When Kamala Harris is up there, there's very little room, but there's more room. I agree that the 5% of voting threshold is important for getting federal funding. It's important for building the party. And that's why I have always advocated strategic voting. I think right now, somebody said they're in California. I'm in Pennsylvania. So to me, it's much more important for me to vote, or it's much more important for the person in California rather to vote their conscience, because it doesn't matter who they vote for. The outcome is going to be the same. Whereas my vote in Pennsylvania could be the difference between Donald Trump being president and Donald Trump not being president. And I'm framing it in those terms because my commitment is not to electing Kamala Harris, it's to stopping Donald Trump. And so in that vein, in that regard, it is incredibly important to me and for me to be thoughtful about the choice that I'm making. So yes, that's a long way of saying yes. Me being in Pennsylvania certainly matters. If I were in New York, and that's the thing, some of y'all brag about the vote y'all made like it's a badge of honor, but it's like, yeah, you live in Vermont, you live in New York, you live in New Jersey, you live in California, you live in Texas. You live in Texas, you can vote for whoever you want. Kamala ain't winning that state. If you're in California, it don't matter. She ain't losing that state. So yeah, you can vote your conscience. But in some states, it's the difference between having a Supreme Court that makes Donald Trump a king. It's the difference, these things matter. I'm not trying to scare people or make it sound like the boogeyman, but these things matter. But I still want all of you all to vote your conscience. I'm not out here saying, y'all better vote for Kamala. We need to. I'm saying that I plan to vote for Kamala because I think it's the most principled choice that I think I can make. It's the best strategic choice that I think I can make. It'll give me the best outcome for our people that I think we can get. That's my choice. And it's hard to make that choice after a speech like tonight. I ain't gonna lie. It didn't make it easy. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me uneasy. But I still have to do what's best because, again, I'm eyes wide open about who she is, who he is, what this election is, but what's at stake for the most vulnerable among us. I just can't ignore that. Anyway, thank you for that. A couple more questions and comments coming in. Bibi is the biggest winner from the DNC. Now he can plan his October surprise of swinging into Trump without a threat. Horrifying. I hope you're not right. I hope you're not right. I disagree. I think that Bibi is the biggest winner when Donald Trump is winning, and Donald Trump did not win this week. Donald Trump did not win this week. He got mollywopped everywhere, up and down that stage at the DNC. He didn't get an RNC bump, but Kamala Harris would likely get a DNC bump. When I say a bump, I mean her approval rates are going to go up. Her national stranglehold on swing states is going to get bigger. That ain't good for Trump. Economic Matters said just checked her website, and even after all the theatrics, she still hasn't listed any policies that she's trying to run for. What's up with it? I mean, I think it's a particular type of rollout. I hope in the next week or two we see policy. The reason I say that is because people had a similar criticism of Obama. And they said Obama doesn't talk about this, he doesn't talk about that, and then suddenly he hit the website, boom, and flooded the world with all these great plans or detailed plans. They weren't great; they were detailed. I didn't agree with them, but they were at least there. Something to think about. Earlier, Robin Walker Murphy gave 10 memberships My sister just doubled it or tripled it, really, because now she gave another 20. So on top of the 10, there's another 20 tonight. She's donated 30 memberships to the channel. I hope y'all snatching the memberships up, y'all. Snatching things up. They're important. Thank you, Robin. Again, I'm so grateful for your generosity. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There was something that I wanted to talk to y'all about. Let me pull it up. Y'all are coming with such great comments. I almost just want to keep talking to y'all, but no, I will get to this. Democrats erase Palestine at the convention. This is an important point that I think y'all need to understand, that we all need to talk about. For the last few days, there has been a very clear conversation taking place about the DNC that started with their rejection of a Palestinian speaker. All week, people were waiting to hear what would be said about Palestine. People were waiting to see what would be said about Palestine. And much of the week was a kind of strategic effort to avoid Palestine talk, to avoid even Israel talk. But then in the last 24 hours, people started to take stock of what had happened. Suddenly, Rashida Tlaib wasn't up there, the only Palestinian in Congress. Other prominent Palestinian Americans weren't up there. And so people started to say, well, why? You know, I hear, according to AOC, that the president is working tirelessly to affect the ceasefire. So you're clearly invested in this issue. Tell us what you're doing. There was talk that a Palestinian will come up and do some conversation, have some kind of conversation about Israel and Palestine. Her name was, she was a state rep out of Georgia. Her name was Roa Roman. And she's an activist. She's a real significant public servant in the state of Georgia. And she was supposed to speak. And then suddenly she got canceled. They suddenly took her out. And people were concerned. And people started to say, put her back on the stage, put Roa back on the stage, or put any Palestinian American back on the stage. We need a Palestinian American up there. And that call got louder when we saw a hostage, right? It was like suddenly people were talking about Israel, and then we saw Israeli hostages on the stage. This feels like an imbalance. Let's talk about all of it. If everybody's suffering is equally legitimate, if everybody's pain is equally unmerited and therefore unacceptable, then let's have that conversation. But suddenly we're not doing that. Bring a Palestinian on. If you're talking about an Israeli hostage or a family member of a hostage, you're talking about somebody who has suffered unnecessarily, unfairly. Well, what the hell do you say to the tens of thousands of people who have been killed in Gaza? Do their voices matter? And so you started to see a campaign saying, let them speak, let them speak, let them speak. I understand that desire. I understand that impulse, but I think it's wrong-headed. I think the DNC was wrong for erasing Palestinians. I think the DNC was wrong for not bringing a Palestinian American up. I get that. But the answer isn't to shame the Democrats into putting a Palestinian up, because what Palestinian do they pick? They're going to pick a Palestinian who is complicit. They're going to pick a Palestinian who is in the minority position among his people or her people. The Palestinian they choose is going to be so severely domesticated and defanged that when they get up on that stage, they're going to sound damn near like the liberal Zionists they're trying to push back against. So I don't necessarily think that the strategy should have been, hey, give us a Palestinian American, because that gives them cover. That makes it look like Democrats have an open tent. That makes it look like Palestinians have a face and a voice in this thing. That makes it easy for America's war crimes to be whitewashed and erased. So I don't want that. I'm actually okay with no Palestinian being up there, because it lays bare what the truth is. It makes it clear what this country is, what this party is. You can make your own decisions about what to do about it. But bringing up a token Palestinian or a token Syrian or a token Iraqi or a token Black person at different moments in history. That ain't it. That ain't the move. So that's that. Anyway, family, thank you for watching Night School. It's such a pleasure to rap to y'all. Such a pleasure to be around y'all, to hear from y'all. Your comments, your questions have been amazing. Someone said Cornel West was protesting and marching today. Yes, he was. I don't doubt that. I didn't see him. I've been traveling all day, but shout out to Brother West. Shout out to my dear brother, Cornel West, who is fighting the good fight and attempting to create justice where there wasn't before. And that's the work of liberation. Shout out to him. Everybody, thank you for watching Night School. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure I'm sorry, I got one more question coming in. Peace Professor, longtime follower. Assuming Kamala is prez, how much do you think she may switch up from campaign promises to presidential policy? Again, from campaign promises to presidential policies. I mean, the problem is she's not promising that much at the policy level yet. So it's hard to know what the gap is between what she's saying and what she's going to do because we don't know yet. Again, that's not even a criticism. That's just a reality. Again, Obama did the same thing. But then once that website go up and all that information is there, now you're going to be held accountable for it. So I'm looking forward to hearing more from Vice President Harris as she unveils her policy initiatives. But it's August, y'all, so I need to see the thing sooner than later. Anyway, hit the like button. Let's the YouTube algorithms know you rock with our content, and that corporate media ain't the only game in town. Hit the subscribe button, because when you hit the subscribe button, you increase our social media footprint, which gives us the space to do the work that we do. And if you're so inclined, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and then press the join button. When you hit the join button, it's right there on the YouTube desktop. If you're on a device, you can click the link to join. Once you join, you become a monthly paid member of the channel. For as little as $3.99, you get all the content, the unlimited content, the early content, the extended content. But more importantly, you help us build this thing that we desperately need to build, an independent media arm. And if you're so inclined but don't have the resources or can't commit to a monthly payment, you could do it 1 month at a time. You could just make a one-time 1 month payment right now. Consider it a tuition for night school. You can make that donation right now through Cash App, through PayPal, through Venmo, or through Zelle. We'd be so grateful. If you give $1, we're grateful. If you give $1 million, we're grateful. Anything in the middle, we're grateful. But if everybody watching right now, every single person watching Night School right now were to donate $10, we would meet our financial goals for the month. If everybody watching right now were to give $10, we would meet all of our financial goals. That's what it's meeting the financial goals that allows us to do Night School Monday to Friday at 9 o'clock, to do office hours at 9 p.m., to do coffee and books at 9 a.m., do the classroom in the cell at 9 a.m. We're able to build this content and put this stuff out because not a billionaire giving us money, not because of a corporate media outlet supporting us, but because we do it with and as the power of the people. So thank you for watching. Please consider dropping something in our Cash App, PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle so we can keep this work going. But even if you don't, keep watching. Even if you don't donate anything, keep sharing the content, keep liking the content, keep subscribing to the content. All of it matters. And of course, keep studying the content, because after all, that's what Night School is all about. I'll see y'all tomorrow night. Peace.